Do you remember maybe 4 or 5 years ago there was a situation where a teenage girl was coming home from school and a Chinese guy attacked her with scissors? Yeah, that didn't happen. Um, but it was connected to CBC. I think it was within 35 or 40 minutes of that girl saying that story happened, telling that lie, and it being published on the story being published on CBC. And so there was a conversation at the time. Hang on, that actually wasn't enough time for them to hear the story, contemplate the story, write the story, and publish the story. It happened within about half an hour. And she made it up. And I'm not going to criticize a teenage girl for anything, honestly. I'm not going to criticize a teenager for anything. But it looked like she had a little bit of encouragement from her mother. And that I will criticize. Okay, so the Chinese community really didn't take kindly to that. They said that this was anti-Asian hate speech or anti-Chinese hate speech, and that it was a bullshit story, and they're not going to put up with it. And I think actually they went and beat some people up. There was some sort of a protest, and people got beat up, and it wasn't Chinese people. So later, Justin Trudeau was interviewed, and what he said was, I think, maybe the most postmodern thing I've ever heard. What he said was, okay, so after we looked into it, what we discovered was that wasn't really an example of Islamophobia. However, I think that we can use this occurrence to understand more about Islamophobia. Okay, so that is postmodern because it doesn't matter what the truth is. What matters is that the right message is taken from it. So what you've got essentially is a made-up story that put Asians in a bad light, and from this we're supposed to take some lesson about Islamophobia. That's postmodernism. It doesn't matter what the truth is. The only thing that matters is whether or not that truth encourages people to behave in the way that postmodernists, you call them wokies now, want us to behave. That's astounding to me. And so a lot of it is propagandistic. Still, I'm waiting for any regular news organization to come back and say, okay, you can relax because the people that attacked the Capitol Hill on January 6th, they were not a cohesive group. They didn't have a plan to take over the government. Take it easy. You don't have to worry about the white supremacist movement. They're not a threat, right? That would be such a service to the country and to truth. No, they're not going to do that. They've got white supremacists, terrorists, Donald Trump, violent assault on the Capitol, insurrection. All those words are tangled up in people's heads, and they're not even bothering to correct that, to go back and say, look, we got it wrong calling it an insurrection. And the thing is that nobody that was arrested was ever charged with an insurrection. The FBI never charged anybody with, I guess you call it seditious insurrection. There's never that charge. So it was obvious from the beginning, at least, that it was the stupidest insurrection in human history, or it wasn't an insurrection. I know I've said this a dozen times, but I really don't care. Um, the only people that were organized in that effort were the FBI themselves. That's the real story. I'm curious whether or not the Canadian military is still training Chinese jet pilots. Remember that? That was just last year. Um, did we get the money back? We paid the Chinese Communist Party for the vaccines. Did we get our money back? Christy Freeland did a speech during the negotiations that I guess what used to be called NAFTA. NAFTA? NAFTA? She did a speech berating Donald Trump during the negotiations. Okay, so do you think that that got us a better trade deal with the United States? You know how vindictive Donald Trump is. Could we have gotten a better deal if Christina Freeland didn't go there and insult Trump? She used to be one of the best intellectuals on the subject of wealth inequality. That was just a few years ago. Now she's a bit of a moron. The last time I saw her, like, well, she looked rough, man. Um, don't you think that 2021 was difficult enough? The BC wildfires, the burning of churches, COVID, or attempted an economic recovery. And these things were predictable. This is the stupidest move strategically that you've made. Everybody's pointing it out that there's just nothing to be gained here. You're not going to win a majority. It's not going to happen now. So we're so worried about what's going to happen to the Afghan military that the United States paid for. So they have to be brought back to Canada or back to the United States. But a lot of them have already jumped ship. So maybe we don't need to be quite as worried about those people as we think. Feminists, the civil society that they're building up. Yeah, that's true. I heard Trump say the other day that in the last, I think, year and a half or so, there's been no American killed by the Afghan army. Imagine that's changed now. And one of the commenters said, "Oh, geez, that's amazing. I mean, there's some cities in Chicago where 14 people get murdered every weekend. 14 might be a high number, but it's like 5, 10, 15 get murdered every weekend." So Trump manages to get Americans not killed. I'm looking at the timer. Over the last year and a half in Afghanistan, and Democratic leaders can't get black people not murdered in big American cities. Which resulted in more death and destruction, the border policy or the Afghan one? I think that when we look back, we'll notice that it's the Afghan. I'm sorry, it's the border policy. It'll be the border policy, Afghanistan, and BLM. It caused the most damage during that period of time. The world is a lot more insecure than it was before. I think that probably in the next year, maybe, or 6 months, or who knows when, China's going to attack the Taiwanese outer islands. Some of them are quite close to China. China's going to take those back because they don't think the United States has the resolve to fight them. It's going to have a major impact on Taiwanese people. So, Joe, yeah, I'm not happy. Wouldn't it be the case that there are Canadians that have relatives that are in Afghanistan right now? Like the CBC, they're doing fluff pieces about somebody did chalk drawings on a sidewalk, or two hikers that met 12 years ago then met again this year, and isn't that a wonderful fluff story? And it's terrific, right? We know that we live in a world where the media is polarized. We know that. So would it not make sense to say, you guys have to be in the middle? And if it was up to me, what I would say is, okay, you're going to get 500 million in 2022. 500 million, that's a lot. And you need to demonstrate to us that you can be unbiased. And so you can't really expect some people to be unbiased. What you can expect more likely is people that are that are biased on the left and people that are biased on the right, and give them equal time. We used to call it equal time. They don't give equal time. They don't give an interview with Douglas Murray or Jordan Peterson or Gad Saad or Janice Fiamingo. They just don't do it. And since they've been leaning left for so long, I think that you should push it back a bit and lean right for a while. There's a whole bunch of people I'd like to see you pay for an interview, and an extended interview. They're fascinating, intelligent, influential people. Like, how could you not report on the the Jordan Peterson? It was a phenomenon. The one time that I saw him on, they attacked him. They were really concerned that he seemed to be leading a movement that it was attractive to men, and they found that really threatening. And, what are you doing? You're giving a voice to men? Don't you know how dangerous that is? Don't you know how kind of corrupt and evil and ignorant it is to say that, men have got issues as well. Feminism is screwing up their lives, and they have a right to express their opinions. So that's what Jordan Peterson said. And he was right, and they pretty much ignored him. I'd like to know how many of the refugees are terrorists. What's the screening? What is their connection to the drug trade, heroin drug trade? How many of them are coming in essentially believing in Sharia law? How many of them have misogynistic attitudes towards women? That wouldn't be the civil society types that they're bringing in, obviously. How many of them speak English? There's a whole host of things that you have to consider. And if you don't consider it, then it's going to have a negative impact for Canada. And the thing is that as soon as they get on the airplane, you can't kick them out again. If they get on the airplane headed for Canada, the second that they get in Canada, we're stuck with them forever. Unless they want to go back, we cannot kick them out, because they will argue, quite correctly, I think, in a lot of cases, that they'll be murdered once they get back. So we are stuck with these people. We'll be fortunate to get some of them, but it'll be a mixed bag. You have to wonder why there's so many Westerners that were still in Afghanistan after all of the warnings that were issued. We're all blaming the leaders, Trudeau and Biden, and for not saying, like, get out, right? So why did they stay there? I think that they felt that they had a responsibility there, probably. And I think it's very difficult just to move from one country to another. But I think it's worth asking, why didn't you get out? By staying there, you created a lot of problems for a lot of people. For Canada, for the United States, for Britain, everybody.